Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Why, hello there.
Oh, guys, this is going to be a big one. This is going to be a lot of fun. And we just want to say, first and foremost, to the YouTube algorithm, all those that will eventually, as this will be demonetized, absolutely, they all are basically, whenever you touch on anything that's happening in the world, and you're not doing it from, it seems, a certain perspective, especially when it seems like you want to just kind of give it in the bigger perspective, things get demonetized. Because again, who is in control of this world? Well, it's the adversary's territory. Well, actually, they're trespassing on our home, and they are going to be pushed aside at some point in time as the natural order of things is going to come back. But they want to take as many souls with them to relive what we live every day in this, dysfunctional system. Are you ready?
Oh boy, let's go.
Okay, so please do subscribe both channels, EEARTS and Evolutionary. Each one gets unique material. And this is going on right now. And we are going to go present to the past and present to the past and far in the past and even farther in the past back to the present. Because again, we want to see the bigger picture. And the vast majority of people on this planet are, even as much as they think they're seeing the whole picture, are not still seeing the whole picture. Cindy and I every day are getting more pieces to the puzzle that pop up, and it's like, whoa, look at that. Oh, yeah. So here you have issues reported with machines in Wickenburg, Arizona, Northwest Maricopa. This is going to be one of the key areas to watch, and so we'll listen.
This is a big issue. What is against law?
Photos and videos.
No, I can have a video if this is not working. This is not okay. Did it work? Yes. Okay. This is awful. This is wrong.
So, we know, and we've been saying this from the get-go, from months ago, from a long time ago. There's a buildup. There is a buildup. And this buildup, we need to get it in perspective. We need to take a step back. Sometimes if we're only looking at a little clip of the picture, if we're only seeing a small little piece of the picture from a distorted lens, we cannot make out the landscape of what's really going on. The more we are in the midst of all the energies, well, in reality, the closer we are to stepping off a cliff, and we might not even know it.
No, you can't see the forest for the trees, and that can be dangerous.
Yeah, if you're looking at everything from, say, a Democratic standpoint, you're not going to get the whole picture. If you're looking at everything from a Republican standpoint, you're not going to get the whole picture. If you think the world is flat, you're not going to get the whole picture. If you think the only book that matters is the Bible or the Quran or any single book out there, you're not going to get the whole picture. We have to step back and allow things to come into focus. There are a lot of things that just don't make any sense in this world when we look at it from the history that has been given to us. Now, we know that history is written by the victors. Well, victors implies there's conflict going on, does it not? Conflict or competition, if there is no conflict, if there is no competition, there's no victors, right?
Then you just have a world where people are being.
Well, right there, we see this in our scriptures. And scriptures from many different sources. For those of you that have studied biblical history and all, you can understand that the mindset of the people that we might call the Jewish people, it changed historically over time as they were influenced by other cultures. And truly, we wouldn't have gotten modern Christianity, per se, if it wasn't for their time spent in the Babylonian and Persian exile. the exposure to Zoroastrianism and the whole duality of light versus darkness, that polarity, it really changed perspectives, and it brought about kind of a messianic mindset. Messianic mindset meaning you're looking for a Messiah, you're looking for a Savior. Now, these are people that were taken into captivity and, brought to a new land as slaves. And they had these glorious dreams of being free. Humanity is going through the same thing. In reality, here we are, we're on this planet. And we might go to the extreme, as we were talking about the other day, of taking a purely Gnostic view that the entirety of the 3D realm is dark and evil because we see all the atrocities in the world. But again, that's only still seeing from one particular lens, because in reality, there is amazing opportunity for growth when we step into the 3D. The 3D it provides for eternal souls. Again, you are consciousness itself. You're having a temporary human experience, and you're trying, many of you guys like us, you're having a fun time, even in the toughest times, putting pieces together, because you find yourselves in the most intricate, amazing mystery that is right here before our faces. And again, it's a matter of perspective. We could look at it from the perspective that humanity is being trampled on, and everything is just dark and evil. Or we could ignore everything entirely and say everything's just fine, as everybody as a society is marching towards a cliff, and many people are trying to scream, don't go off that ledge. It's not a gentle drop. It could be very, very disastrous if you don't change course. Wake up to the dangers that are ahead. The dangers that are ahead are the dangers that have been behind us. So we need to go back to the past to see the future. The future's right before our eyes, and yet it's also under our feet, and it's also hidden in plain sight all around us. We just can't see it. So many of you guys might have seen stuff like this before, and you got to ask yourself, well, what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at what looks to be an entire level to a building that was underground. Why would you put windows in underground, under the soil? That defies logic, does it not? And yet, there you go. And you could see where the drain pipes, and in reality, New York, Paris, London, did you know that there are tunnels underground that can take you from London all the way to Turkey? Oh, there's so much more than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm. And they treat it like it's such a nothing burger. You can't get this information into the mainstream and get reasonable answers. You only get what they are willing to give us. You only get what they're going to spoon feed us. But when we go and we find this information, why is our history not our true history? It's not put in front of us at all. It's basically taken from us, and we are put into a school system, and this school system teaches us only what we need to know. So I keep hearing this need to know thing. Everything is on a need to know basis, because as long as it is that, they are in control. So that makes it even more important for us to look around us, expand our consciousness, and really see the bigger picture, so we can co-create in a way that is, organic, in a way that we are supposed to, in a way that is fruitful, and not something that's contained and directed.
Contained and directed. Absolutely. So when we take a bigger step back and we look at this, and we see, a city here that appears that it's forgotten about a whole floor in this, building, which, yes, it looks like an older building, but it's not that old. It's not that old. And there's a whole floor that's underneath the ground. And this has happened all over the globe. And, of course, we are referring to what many know as the Mudflood, Tartaria. This is one of the world's most interesting mysteries for many people. And I want to touch on this, and we're going to, not spend the entirety of this video on this, because again, we could do a series of videos. We've done a couple on this, but we can do a complete series. And, unfortunately, this is one of the things that's covered up more than anything. This is one of those things where they are constantly cyber burning all the evidence, because the grid that is around us, the control grid that is around us, will blow your paradigm if you believe the earth is 6,000 years old and was just created by, God just 6,000 years ago. It'll also blow your paradigm if you think that there's very, very slow change. It happens over the course of hundreds of millions of years, and that everything moves at a glacial pace. Because here we have two extremes that are given to us, just like left and right. Are you a Democrat or are you a Republican? Are you a capitalist or are you a communist? You got to be one or the other, right? There can't be any other alternatives, can there? Well, it's the same thing. Do you believe in evolution? Do you believe in creation? How about evolution as a natural process of creation itself? How about the fact that, yes, there's been creation, there's been intervention, there's been playing around with human DNA, turning things on, turning things off, mutating. It's going on to this day. Well, wait a minute. You don't believe in Christianity, so you don't believe there's a God? No, I do believe there's a God. I do believe there's a creator of this universe. And in fact, I'm positive. But you said you're not Christian. Oh, okay. So you're Muslim? No. You're Jewish? No. Oh, are you a Hindu? Not really. Are you Buddhist? Well, Buddhists don't really look at it in that sense. We don't have to be anything. If we don't label ourselves as anything, we're not basically putting on lead weights and locking ourselves into a position. We're just observing. And we're making note of all the observations and all the evidence that's around us. There are core beliefs that we have, such as we know that our consciousness exists beyond the body. How do you know that? Well, because we've experienced it. And we have recollections of past lives that have been verified by, each other and then others that we've been in contact with as well. And, again, Dr. John Mack did some amazing research. I really do want to do a whole video going into his work. Unfortunately, he met his demise early crossing the street. Could happen. He was a pain in the ass to the power structure. There's many people that have been pains in the ass to the power structure. We just talked about this cryptocurrency young man, and honestly, it tweaks my heart because it reminds me of people that are close to me when I look at him. And at 29, he was making joking references to he might not be here soon, and he's not. At 29, you're just getting started. You got to recognize the fact that, oh yes, we truly are living in a world that is the matrix part, the dark control system is created by what we could call Satan, which, Satan, the adversary, that's what Satan means, is very real. Absolutely. There are beings that are parasitic in nature, that are controlling so many aspects of our lives. Yet, when we wake up, they truly can't control us. I don't care what their technology is, because, again, the natural order of things can overwrite and overdo anything that they do, because they're very limited in scope when we see. But our history is not what the creationists have given us, and it's not what the scientists have given us either. Why would this is not a door for midgets. It's not a crawl space. It defies explanation of why you would build whole or partial underground structures with windows and doors as if you could walk straight out to ground level. And we might not even notice these things. And gosh, I think about, it's wonderful to look back at history. And, I do have some regrets about not getting to see again some of the stuff that was passed on in my family lineage, because I was on the West Coast when my mom passed. And we had a lot of stuff like this. I mean, photographs going back to the 1910s. Even earlier. And this evidence, unfortunately, is getting harder and harder to find, but the evidence is underneath our feet the whole time. It's underneath our feet. This is Seattle, right? I mean, wait a minute. What I've felt in the West, and I was just sharing with Cindy, that, when we went through the West, for me, traveling all through the Southwest in particular, it was a roller coaster emotionally. You might say, well, how's the desert going to be a roller coaster emotionally? There's nothing there. You mean when you went through the cities? No, I don't mean the cities. No, I mean different rock piles, different formations, and just, I would all of a sudden feel a certain energy, and we'd have to pull over. And, a couple of times I had to ask Cindy to drive. Pulling the trailer, which she can do. She's a, country girl. She could do it. But because I was overwhelmed with the energies of death and destruction that hit people all of a sudden that they weren't expecting from above, this world is not what you think it is. You think we have high technology now. What we see is nothing compared to the technology that's in play now. And it was in play 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It's so different than what we think. And when I look at this, I love this architecture. It's gorgeous. But there's something very dark about it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. There was just information coming up with our meditation and mantras today. And they were telling me, pull up the buildings and look at what is on top of them. That is not for looks. That is not just because it's something pretty. No. This goes far beyond that. And it was disturbing. It's actually quite disturbing. But you know what? It all comes together and it all fits. And believe me, they would never teach any of this in any kind of indoctrination, schooling at all ever, because it's just beyond. It's beyond our understanding, but it's always been that way. And then you look at all these buildings in these cities and how they build on top of one building, on top the next. Why do they continue to build in these specific areas? Why do they continue to put so much energy into specific areas on the planet? After a while, it starts to look like they're kind of gridding and they're kind of putting something together that's quite deliberate. That's what I'm seeing.
Oh, absolutely. As we said, there's natural ley lines all across the planet, and, sometimes, and, let me apologize to you guys, because a lot of the times there's thoughts that go through my head and lines of reasoning and stuff that, because a lot of people don't have the attention span or the time because of their work schedules to listen to 2-3 hours, I would be better served. I could get you guys so much more constructive train of thought that you'd be able to follow along with if we did do 2, 3, 4 hour videos, because honestly, it's all there. There's so much to share, and we share it in little bits and pieces. Because, again, it's a TikTok world. Just think about it. And to me, when I see TikTok, I think that's in some ways the pinnacle of this dystopian system. when you only get 3 minutes. 3 minutes is the biggest upload you could do on TikTok. And look at YouTube now, YouTube Shorts. They're going to monetize YouTube Shorts starting, I think they said, February. Why do they want little clips? Because there's no way you're going to get the bigger picture from tiny little snapshots. This is part of it. This is part of it. Keep our attention span down. Make it so people can't sit still for an hour's worth of meditation. In the old days, we certainly could. In the old days, we could do things like, say, just be out in nature. What are you going to do today? Well, we got to cut some wood. We're going to make some soup, for dinner tonight. And then we're just going to, take a walk out in nature. Think about how amped up we are in this culture. We don't spend that time just noticing the birds, just soaking in the sun, smelling the freshness of the air. When that first rain comes, that amazing smell that comes. When the first snow comes, it's so magical. We don't have the time to just admire and really soak in these things anymore. That's because we are being used as emotional food for these entities, as just a resource. They harvest our energy. These spires that you see on these gorgeous churches. And, of course, so much of this makes me think of architecture all over Russia and down, from the Byzantine Empire down into Turkey, into Anatolia. There's so many mysteries all throughout the area. But when you're looking at these spires, what's the purpose of a spire? Well, is it aspiring to reach to God? Or is it actually technology that's sending signals into the ether? And there's the evidence of these mud floods, the evidence of this periodic devastation. And, yesterday, for trying to keep the video into a certain time frame, I didn't cover all the floods that are happening. There's floods happening all over the globe right now. So, what we went through with the mud flood, again, the evidence of everything else gets wiped away on a regular basis. And yet, the evidence of so many lives that have been hidden is there under the streets you're walking. And even under, perhaps the streets in a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, there might be a mega city under your feet. When we look to these pictures, do you notice something that just doesn't fit? Oh, there's a lot that doesn't fit in this world. There's a lot that doesn't fit in this world. Somebody had seen one of our videos and, they said something like, you do realize there's technology decades ahead of what we know. Decades? We're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of years, because we're talking about technology that is not Homo sapiens. And again, we haven't always, not all of us, haven't always been Homo sapiens. We, again, are inhabiting these bodies. These bodies, as I've equated it multiple times, we find ourselves jumping into, what you might call a muscle car that has California emissions. Any of you guys around and grew up in the 70s or maybe even the 60s and the 80s, remember those gorgeous muscle cars? Like, I was always more of a Mopar guy. But, can you imagine strapping something like a modern California emissions setup, on a 69 CUDA? It's just an atrocity. But that's what they've done to our bodies, and worse. Because our bodies should have the ability to do a lot more than they do, and they should last a lot longer than they do. When you look at this looks like this is taken out of time. I mean, what is this? Was this a Christmas decoration? What's going on here? I mean, this, I don't know. Horse-drawn carriages, 1890s? I'm guessing. Something like that. What's that tower doing there? It looks so modern, doesn't it? It looks kind of like what we see today all the time. In fact, again, we see that even though it may be hidden in architecture, these technologies have been in play. Oh, way longer than people think. Way, way longer than people think. And I always marvel at this old architecture. I love it. The familial house of my family on my mom's side is a Victorian one that left the family after my aunts died in the 90s, so quite a while ago, 30 years ago now. But it had spires like this. And, they bought it in the Depression for, I want to say, either $13,000, $14,000 in the Depression. Think about that in these times. It was a gorgeous work of art. And, we don't see attention to detail. But what's really going on with those spires? What's really going on? We've talked so much about the technology that's out there now and its ability to alter consciousness and affect our bodies as well. It's always been there. There's different examples of this in these ancient photographs, but there's always been a certain technology out there. I mean, look at that. Isn't that not curious?
Mm-hmm. And it's all over the globe. It's everywhere. Everywhere. This is a system that's been ongoing for we have no idea how long. And look at the videos, the shorts, the TikToks. This is keeping the information that is stored within our DNA very much contained and withdrawn and limited. Right now, when we tap into our ancestors, we can tap into a lot of information that has been learned throughout lifetimes because they had a way to sit and focus and just move along and bloom with the earth. And right now we can tap into that. And what do you think we're doing when we're watching these TikTok videos and we're building families on top of that? We're actually shortening our DNA's ability to send messages to our children that are growing up now. And our children are growing up with, so this is very debilitating to humans. That's exactly what I see. So we stand at a precipice right now. And we have a very, very, very big decision that we need to make. And we have to know who we are and why we are making these decisions, because we need a form of willpower to make it through. And willpower is something where you need to know your why. If you create your why, then you have the will. So that's the importance of sitting and finding out who you are, doing the mantras, doing the meditation, taking the time, because we're at this precipice again.
The world is about to go through another mudflood of sorts, and it's already begun. And I'm not talking about the rains. That's just part of washing away evidence of what has happened in the past. As we know, there's more than enough documentation of declassified weather modification that actually goes back pre-1900. And of course, that's not even scraping the surface, guys. That's not even scraping the surface. When you look at all this, look at this. I mean, look at that. What is that? Again, is it going to hold Christmas lights? Well, these were made even before the plugins for the lights. There's so much that's right before our very eyes. And when we start to look outside of just looking at the Abrahamic tradition, because, there are some secrets in there. There's some beautiful, heartfelt energies and thoughts given in Proverbs and Psalms, and certainly in some of the writings that are attributed to Yeshua, Jesus. But if we just look to one book, that's what they want. They want everybody to be compartmentalized. When you look at our government, it's compartmentalized. When the CIA is not talking to the FBI, not really talking to the DOJ, and you, of course, have different parts of the government not really sharing all their info and talking to one another, it's done on purpose. Because, again, if we could look at all the evidence, we'd all of a sudden discover our entire perspective on the world is off. It's totally off. And when we start to study other people's traditions, so again, that whole thing about pride and patriotism, there's a bigger purpose behind that. Well, I live in the best country in the world. No need to look elsewhere. Watch out for that cliff. What cliff? I can't see it. No, because you're walking straight down a very, very narrow path and you got the blinders on. When you look to the Piri Reis map, and you got to wonder, how did they know this? Because it shows Antarctica without the ice sheet. And again, this is another video all to itself, and we've done a video on this before too. So this is a world map created by Ottoman Turkish cartographer Ahmed Muhaddin Piri. Now, this was 1513. The map has garnered attention because it appears to show an ice-free Antarctic coastline. If that's the case, then someone discovered and mapped Antarctica centuries before its reported discovery in 1773. Yeah, and also somehow they had the technology to go down below the ice. That's on the surface. That is not giving you a clear view. How could this be? Well, there's a couple things. Either they simply were copying something that was in existence that goes back even farther. But if you're going to go by modern science, it's going to go back way, way farther. Because again, Antarctica, we were told, has been frozen over for a long time. But has it? Or did it freeze over with the cataclysm that we might know of as Noah's flood? And again, Noah's flood is taken from the Sumerian story, which is at minimal 2,000 years earlier, and it's revised. So again, when people are talking in terms of Adam and Eve and Shem and Ham and Japheth and Noah, that's the revisionist history part. That's the distorted revisionist history taken from much older sources. This is part of how they are constantly rewriting everything. You might find out that a lot of the myth of Christ is taken from other sources, other beings, etc. But again, that's part of the distortion. Now, Yeshua himself was an absolute incredible blessing upon the planet. And he is a unique individual. And he's still with us. And he's still working with many people. And see, this is, again, part of that distortion that people cannot conceive, that Yeshua would be working with beings that we might perceive of being from other traditions, like, say, Isis, who you might think of as an Egyptian goddess, but she's not from Egypt. She's not from this planet. Again, that's part of the distortion. So yes, these beings that are beautiful, benevolent beings, they do work together. Because, again, they don't have any of humanity's preconceptions, and they haven't been turned on each other like humanity has been turned on itself.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at one belief system to the next, you run into these situations where there's this dogma, there's this sudden screeching of the tires with information coming to a complete halt, that you're no longer allowed to go past this wall of information from one belief system to the next. So you can see this belief system that we have that's been put in place for so long has its purposes. And this is why we're always saying you need to go within and you need to find out what you believe. And that can be very, very difficult. It can be very, very scary because really we haven't been taught how to expand. But when we look at these other beings like Yeshua, like Krishna, like Isis, these are all about expansion. They're all about exploration. They're all about helping you figure out who you are, and not creating boundaries and walls and saying, oh, this is true and this is not true, and you have to believe it or else. There is none of that. There's just expansion. And I want you to think of the word blooming. This is the reason why we are here. This is what was originally intended, is for our consciousness to bloom into something much greater.
Not only did this 1513 map include excessive annotations and accurate depictions of the Azores, the Canary Islands, the Atlantic Islands, and Japan in 1513, but historians were amazed to find it included a depiction of Antarctica. Antarctica wasn't discovered till 1773 officially, so how could it be possible to be on a map dated 260 years earlier? The mystery deepened further. Not only did the Piri Reis map show the coastline of Antarctica, but it displayed the proportions of the continent without an ice cap, which were only visible over 6,000 plus years ago. So again, this is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. Or, what's the real story? How often do we go through these mud floods? That's very, very interesting, isn't it? 1737 map of Antarctica, showing the continent ice-free, using spherical trigonometry. The map is a copy of an older map. Spherical trigonometry had just been invented and was not in common use. Yes, and this one's saying Antarctica hasn't been ice-free for 8,000 years. The fact is, we don't really know. But we personally, Cindy and I, have seen in our explorations out west things that don't make sense. And things that don't make sense if you're given the actual history that we're given. Do you know of the incredible 45-day storm that turned California into a 300-mile-long sea? And it could happen again. There was a massive 19th century storm in the Pacific. It opened up a 300-mile-long sea that stretched through much of the central part of California. And it looks like the state's due for another mega flood. For 43 days, 1861. Now, 1861, what was happening? The Civil War. One thing I've noticed, and this goes back to my youth, was that when we had these times of major war going on, because there's always wars, but the big wars, the bigger wars, it seemed like we had more quote-unquote natural disasters in those time periods. Could it be because of our mindset and our energy? Could it be because of the negative emotions, the hatred, the anger, all those type of things affecting the very planet itself? Well, again, we are all cells in the earth. So yeah, our consciousness, where we are emotionally, can affect the whole. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Right. Our energy goes out there. Thoughts are things. They're very, very important. And that's not to say we should just ignore the surroundings around us and not acknowledge what's happening. But what we do need to do is feel what's going on inside of us. What are we sending out there into the etheric realms? What are we creating? And in order to have a creation, we have to have a vision. Because again, thoughts are things, and that's really, really going to be coming to the forefront. People are going to be able to realize to a very deep extent how their visions and their thoughts shape their very existence here on this planet. And how when you share those visions and thoughts with other people, it makes those visions and thoughts come to mind or come into being. That's the part that's hard to get across to people. You really can. Those visions in your mind can come into being. It's very, very real.
So again, for 43 days, 1861 to early 1862, it rained almost nonstop in Central California. Rivers running down the Sierra Nevada mountains turned into torrents that swept entire towns away. The storm was caused by an atmospheric river. You guys probably know that term. We hear it all the time, when we're looking at Earth changes. And this atmospheric river, large concentration of water vapor that can cause devastating storms. You got to think about the technology that could be put in place to create these conditions. And these storms have the potential of hurricanes, or even more so, because they can go on for weeks without change. And what this did, and this is, again, one of those areas, we see this happen. We do see this happen in the Pacific Northwest. And so it basically filled up the valley. And it just washed everything away. Thousands of farms totally underwater, cattle starving, drowning, roads cut off. Nearly every house and farm over this immense region is gone. America has never before seen such desolation by a flood as this had been. Seldom has the old world. Well, that might not be the case. As you could see, here you go, looking at what happened. This whole area became an inland sea. You could see the water depth, 10 to 20 feet, and the darker, 3 to 10 feet, and then less than 3. But you see what happened? Now, you don't see anything over here, but we have seen evidence for ourselves over there of massive floods. So that was something that was fact. And in fact, when we look to, and this is Nevada, by the way, as you can see, Carson City over here, Lake Tahoe. If we look to the past, we will see that a lot of the maps that the Earth changes that have been given by people like Edgar Cayce, Gordon Michael Scallion, and others, it's like they're looking into the past. Now, is it that they're looking into the past and thinking it's the future, or is the future going to repeat what happened in the past? I never felt secure, honestly. I never felt comfortable in Nevada, and that's where so much of Cindy's family is. And we were trying to make a go of it and staying close to family there. But then, we had to move on. And again, we listen to the guides. When the guides tell us to move, we go. Just like that. And it really doesn't matter what is going on. When we get that message to go, we go. Because there's a bigger purpose in mind. There's always a bigger purpose. And that's why we're, always listening to what we get each day in meditation. But this is something that has occurred in the past. Now, they'll tell you it was, so long ago. But when you think about Nevada, you don't think about it, having the topography that, maybe we would expect up towards the Great Lakes. Look at all that water. Where is it now? Is it, well, hey, look to Mars. They say the water's there. It's just under the crust. But again, things can happen very, very quick. Very, very quick. So when we look to what's happened in the West, and then what's forecast to happen too, because Casey did say that so much of this is going to be underwater. Now, he's been very off with his timelines, because a lot of what he was talking about, prophesizing, was for like the 70s and the 80s. So we're talking 40 years later. It hasn't happened yet. But of course, too, nothing is set in stone. We do have our wills to exercise and to put out a positive future. And then you do have also the technology of the controllers in play as well. Late Cretaceous, 75 million years ago. This is what it looked like. You could see. And this may be similar to some of the extreme Earth changes maps that we've seen, some of the more extreme. As you see, basically, the eastern is cut off from the western. You know, I've had visions of us, and I've shared some of these visions with you guys, but recently I've had visions of being over in the Western and feeling, especially like there was no way to go up into the Northeast, and I don't know if that was because of conflict or the fact that maybe the states are broken up, and certain states are in now an all new country, and others are persona non grata. That could be too. But I just saw us basically, the freeness was moving towards the central and some areas in the west, but not as far as California and the coastline. So, take that for what you will. Everybody needs to go in and really develop that communication with your higher self yourself.
Mm-hmm. You develop this magnetic feeling, and you start feeling pulled to different areas. And then at times, for many people, situations change in their life so that they do suddenly have a path to make changes. They suddenly have a path to do something. This usually happens when you have an alignment done. It's like everything shifts and moves around you so that you can go to those places that you really feel called to go for. But that's how you get that feeling, is you have to be quiet and go within and really clean up your diet, clean up your world, and then you can hear these signals more and more clearly.
So it's election day, guys, and hang on tight, but also ground yourself. Ground yourself, ground yourself, ground yourself. There are definitely outcomes that many people want to see. The worst thing that you could do to a little kid is to show it a lollipop or ice cream or something like that. Put it out like they're just got to reach and take it from you, and then you just pull it away. And then you walk away. Or you put it away and you just ignore them. Oh, that little guy's going to get mad. Or little gal. So we see from Zero Hedge, ABC News says a red mirage will look like a big Republican win, but vote count can take weeks. And even talking about, as all the mail-ins come in, many, again, we've seen it before, hanging chads in Florida. Would the history have changed totally if Florida didn't flip back? Would we have had 9/11 the way it came down? No, that's something we could debate about. But certainly when you see big things like this and results that might look like it's going one way and then get totally reversed, recognize, and this is with all seriousness and solemnity, there are beings that literally feed off of negative emotions. The more negative emotions, the bigger the feast. And really, power structure counts on these beings to do a lot of their work for them. So expect the unexpected. Expect that which would trigger the most negative emotions.
And that was the part of the vision that came through today that was so disturbing. Realizing that truth, that there are beings siphoning from our very essence emotions that are very negative emotions, but they feed off of it. They live off of it. And when you really go out there and feel out into the ether and you see the intricacies and how it works and how deliberate it is, it's almost, for me, it's difficult to continue on and follow those threads of information. But I will follow them long enough and far enough so that I can speak to you guys and we can present this information in front of you, because knowledge is a power. It does. We can make decisions if we really truly know what is going on. Then it suddenly gives us a desire and a new desire, a new strength, and a new will to move things in a direction that is more about our free will. And that's why we put this information out there. And believe me, it's not popular getting this stuff out there, especially when you're going up against a system that needs to keep silent and they need to keep invisible to keep their power.
So when you look to the map, we might see some shifts. We might, but I think the most likely thing is the creation of more irritable people through basically, again, that whole feeling that something should be shifting one way and seeing stuff that's going to feel positive and then having it reversed on you, so to speak. Again, we want to hold a positive vision, but recognize the change we need is not something so small as changing a couple seats, in the political structure, which itself relies so much on money. Money. The changes are monumental that are going to happen and that have happened in the past. Totally monumental. As you see, shallow inland seas out in the west in areas that we would not have thought was underwater in perhaps just a few hundred years ago. So when we talk about that election tsunami, there is a tsunami. There are multiple tsunamis coming in many different ways, and we must be prepared for that. When I see this sign, welcome to Pahrump. Well, we lived in this area, as did Art Bell, by coincidence. And going the opposite way, if you were going out of Pahrump and heading out towards 95 to head towards Amargosa, as we own the piece of the desert over there. Of course, we never really own anything. I would, every time, going just past this area when we first would look out onto the desert below us, I would get these visions of it being completely underwater. And it was gorgeous. When I say completely underwater, the mountains were rising out of it. So it was an inland sea, and I could see it every time. I would say to Cindy, my God, I could just see the water here, and my God, it is beautiful. Beautiful. I mean, it feels like the Mediterranean. It was gorgeous, and I don't think it was that long ago. In Amargosa, we were within view of the great sand dune there. This sand dune was our nightly view. I mean, we could see this from where we were living, and that whole area was underwater not that long ago. We found clams, fossilized clams. We found sea sponges. We found coral. We found a tooth that I don't know where it went, but I know it was a giant's tooth. And we found on the property too. And there was a portal on the property. And we would see ships almost every single night. One of the neighbors pointed to this one rock that reminded me of Mount Kailash and said that, the indigenous people in the area say that's an entrance to the inner earth, and I would believe it because I found myself just staring at it all the time, just staring at it. And I do think it was an inner earth entrance at that point in time. And we did find dinosaur-like footprints once on the property when Zeke and Sassy were going crazy, and Cindy saw something that was probably only visible in 4D, but she can see into 4D all the time. So it did freak her out. It was night, and I was in the camper, and she was out and by the fire, and she screamed, and I came running out, and she was like, it was slumped over and hunched, and it looked at me, and then we found these three-toed footprints that were very much dinosaur-like on the property.
That was probably, one of the things that scared me most about it being out there is that thing was so deliberate. And sometimes when you're looking out into the ether, you can't really tell if you're looking with the third eye or if you're looking with two eyes. But that thing, it felt like it was staring right back at me just as much as I was looking at it, and the energy, the penetrating energy was the worst. But yeah, I mean, a lot of interesting things happen out there. It's definitely a world unto itself. It's a place where beauty might not show itself right away, but when you learn to place your gratitude in certain positions, you start to see beauty in the most unlikely places, and you start to pull the beauty out of everything, and you realize the sand is art itself. So there was a lot of really good peaceful times out there, and there were some crazy times too.
Absolutely. And Yeshua found so much peace and solace in the desert. It was exactly what he needed to go deeper and, to connect as strongly as he did with his higher self. So when we look to the past, we see that these areas have been full of water. And the thing is, it's the timelines. They're not giving us true timelines. Change happens rapidly. It can happen exceedingly rapidly. And what were they telling you today? They were saying that the earth is like a lady that likes to change her makeup or her dress or what have you often.
Yes, the divine feminine. She likes to change the way she looks quite often. Yes.
So you see here an update from Brazilian leaders. Military audit of the election will now be released Wednesday. Dozens of boxes had Bolsonaro votes. Evidence will be presented of fraud. The nation is on the brink of social collapse unless the military has a strong presence. Yeah, what's going on in Brazil, we need to pay attention to, because again, this is not only going to go on in the U.S., it's going to be kind of a global phenomenon. And it's all going to be revealed now, guys. It's all going to be revealed. We're going to be seeing the truth that we've been controlled the entire time. These were the most expensive midterm races ever. Is it just me? Or is it just contradictory and just wrong? It just, to me, it seems like money should have nothing to do with elections. When you're looking for true leadership, here we're barking up the wrong tree entirely. We need to be looking to people that have wisdom of a bodhisattva, not people that are driven by ego, greed, and that simply, the more money behind somebody is going to equate to a victory. Of course, we're going to end up getting a system that's dysfunctional and run by people that are all interested in their own self-serving interests, people that can be bought and paid for. So, it's just so obvious. This is not the system that's going to get us into a new era of real, true freedom. Now, U.S. democracy slides towards competitive authoritarianism. Competitive authoritarian. Yeah, so we compete to see who's going to be the dictator, is what they're saying. Yeah, or at least the puppet, the face of the dictatorship. This is the reality of what's going on. And when we look to the health of the society that we're in, it's sick. It's so sick and twisted. It's so distorted. It is, again, you're not going to fix it with more of the same. If you're suffering from a certain type of poisoning, there are some things that won't kill you, but if you constantly take them in small quantities, they're going to cause a problem. Taking in more is not going to be the solution. Of course not. 42% of Gen Z diagnosed with mental health condition. 57% of people are on some sort of FARMA. And you wonder why people can't feel nature? Have you ever felt the heartbeat of the earth below your feet? You can. It takes work. It takes cleaning up our diet. It takes cleaning out our system. Your body truly is your temple. And if your temple is all cluttered up and distorted, how in the world could you sense all those things that are around you, but not visible to the senses, things that you can't see, feel, touch? If you're eating a standard American diet, if you're taking in all the nanu that's in all of the fast foods, all the GMO products, all these distortions, the simple sugars, high fructose corn syrup, and especially when we start getting into the stuff that the script that you would get from the DR period, you're being shut off. It's like you're putting the blinders on, you're plugging your ears, and you're putting yourself in a padded cell. You won't be able to sense anything. You're not going to be at your top operating. It's taking that muscle car and putting in a very, very low octane gas that's been sitting in a bucket for 2 years. That engine, if you are able to get the things started, it's not going to take you anywhere.
And that's such a good visualization of the understanding that they're doing to our bodies in a very deliberate way. And I notice people have such a hard time thinking that the controllers would actually do that. Why would people do that to other people? And it goes on up the ladder until you realize, because ultimately at the top, it's not humans doing it to humans. It's a different force that we're dealing with. But we are going to a place and we are evolving. And this is making it more and more difficult for us to live in an environment that's set up for us in an artificial manner. They're trying to indoctrinate us so that we are able to run their companies that they want us to run and fill in their processes and have us do the things that run their system. And that's not what we're born to do. You definitely don't judge a fish by the way it climbs a tree. You just don't.
I love that one. So 45's birthday. Now, again, you got to recognize there's so much in play here. There's so much in play. There's so much that's been given to us as pieces to puzzles to try to piece together these things. There's a lot of things that are right in front of our faces. When they go looking for the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama or some of these very, very high important people that are going to reincarnate again, and they're looking for the soul. I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of this, but they'll bring, say, because in Buddhism, it's not one where a lot of physical objects. It's not basically a philosophy in which material gains are the goal per se. Of course, there's distortion in every tradition, and each tradition has been infiltrated and twisted in many different ways, unfortunately, in this world with this world system. But often they'll bring like the bowl that the person used in his last life, and maybe even an article of clothing or something, maybe the mala beads, and just see where the potential candidate would be able to sense. They might put like 4 bowls out. Which one was yours? 4 or 5 sets of mala beads. Which ones do you think are yours? And see if the person picks the right one, gravitates to the right one, has certain characteristics and mannerisms, because they want to make sure that they are getting the right person to lead. So they're aware of the fact that souls reincarnate. This is part of our soul's journey. So recognize a lot of things are scripted, and there are a lot of people out there that, and this is a very delicate thing, because again, we're not endorsing 45. We're certainly not endorsing 46. We don't endorse the system. But at the same time, there are people that are keys to certain timelines and keys to these events. Like when 45 came on the stage and was going against HRC, I knew in my gut that if HRC won, then we were heading into more of that WW3 scenario quicker, and everything was going to distort and disintegrate quicker. But then I also just knew instinctively that if 45 did become 45, the pathway was going to be one that led to civil conflict sort of a new revolution per se, and it's going to be a tough one as well. Yeah, any way you looked at, because we were so deep in the system, either path leads to a lot of chaos, a lot of tragedy, and tough times. But that's because we're so deep in this system, and yet we are awakening. So, the awakening is going to be a little bit painful. It's fascinating to see this. And so when's Donald's birthday there? He was born June 14th, 1946. June 14th, 1946. Now, this is what they say. And maybe it is the case. Maybe it's a distortion. I don't know. That's the problem. We don't know. But they want you to know that this is his birthday. Well, June 14th, 1946, there was a total lunar eclipse on a blood moon, just like we are having. What does that mean? Well, when we look at this is the detailed eclipse path. So it basically is incorporating from Africa to Australia. India is in the center, as well as Asia and the Middle East and all. So that's the part that had the full effects of it. Is it not fascinating that here we are on election day with a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon, now in 2022, and 45 is still being talked of. For those of you that have been following us, we told you before the election happened that it's going to look like 45 is no longer around, but he is going to be. And so, not that he is our savior. Let me reiterate that. We don't believe he is our savior by any means. We don't believe in a savior, because who's going to save us? It's going to be us. We are. Yet, he does play an important part in all this and the unraveling of the old system. Because, again, what are eclipses all about? Oh, change. Change. Hang on tight.
Oh my gosh, yes. So we look at this information and we look at the eclipse, and what do we see coming out of this? What exactly does this mean? And if you kind of go within and look at your own life and people that are around you and the changes that they are experiencing, the things that have occurred in their lives that have shifted them in a different direction, this is exactly what this means. This is a marker. This is a marker for humanity to make changes. Did they put it out there artificially for us to look at that? It doesn't look artificial. It does look like a marker for us to change. And I guess that's the consciousness that I want to put out there. I want things to be different. I want our lives and ourselves to be free. So if we're going to take this information, we're the ones who get to direct it. Let's not take their direction. Let's direct how we want to see it.
And just to reiterate again, we don't think there's any salvation in this system. And again, we don't believe in that whole concept of original sin and salvation in the first place. So we're not looking for a Messiah. Each person is their own Messiah, per se. But at the same time, he is definitely a key player in these times. And it's not that he has to lead. It's just that he's been put out there. He is, as she's saying, he's a significant marker. He's a significant marker. Is he an actor? Yes. Is he a billionaire? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know what his true net worth is. Again, everything is distorted. Is he full of ego? Absolutely. He is loaded with ego. Is he a wonderful saint? No, he's not a saint. You don't become a billionaire by becoming a saint. I mean, these things are incongruous. So, does he have a white hat on? Yes, he has a white hat for himself. Yeah. It's all about him. That's what we have to realize. But is he a marker? Now, Cindy does get that his soul wants to change things. His soul is not happy with the darkness that's enshrouded. We've also gotten that he truly does care a lot about Barron. And again, how much can you buck the system when you're talking about a system that is so entrenched not just here, but it actually extends to other planets. And this is the part that, again, you'll get people that will say, well, I don't believe in the ET side of things, but, I do think that it's a group of humans that are so deeply entrenched. The power structure that's in place is well beyond the capabilities of any of these families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, et cetera, et cetera. We could go on down with all these families with these lineages. No, the power that is backing them, that would need to back them, is far beyond these families. Way beyond. They couldn't hold this together. These families couldn't hold it together. You got to realize there's something much more powerful than them that's holding it together. And so we do get that he would love to step into the light, because he hasn't been in the light. He truly hasn't. He's part of the system. He's been part of the system. Yet again, he does value Barron, and he is looking to Barron as being a major player in the future. And again, if you buck the system too much, then we've seen time and time again, look to Phil Schneider, look to the 29-year-old kid that we were talking about with the cryptocurrency that's no longer with us. He had a drowning accident. I don't know if it was in a kiddie pool. I don't know if it was in his bathtub. They didn't give you the details. But you understand the bigger picture here. There's only so much. Now, he has been also burdened with a darkness upon the lineage. And one thing to recognize too is that any of these controlling families, they tie into the group that we would call the Igigi. These are Igigi lineages. So again, good cop, bad cop. Yes, there could be that absolutely underway. But at the same time, do they have a difference of opinion? Well, according to the legends, Enki and Enlil had serious differences of opinion when it came to humanity. But the key takeaway is they both agreed that humanity was a slave race.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Good cop, bad cop. They both had an agreement. And when we look at our human bodies, our tendency, the things that we just naturally do, that's directed as well. Those things are shifted in a way to where these controllers understand which way the herd is going to go. If they apply pressure this way, whole herd's going to go that way. If we apply pressure this way, well, everybody's going to do that. They're conditioning us and then applying pressure somewhere, watching us funnel into a direction that's advantageous to them.
And of course, we had Barron Trump's marvelous underground journey, into all the societies and the beings that are inside the earth. There are beings of advanced technology inside the earth, under the seas. There are underneath the seas cities right now to this day. The technology that exists on this planet with beings that you can call Terran, as much as we are Terran. They are as much as we are from here. And we've had some interactions up at Shasta with some of these beings that really were here when Lemuria was the dominant landmass on the planet and society on the planet. And these beings are fifth density, and very much they are like other Pleiadians, so to speak. And so, when we see all this is a foreshadowing of what is going on now. It's part of the bigger plan. Some people have said, is he a time traveler? Gosh, I love Led Zeppelin. I'm a traveler of both time and space, even on a dream. Aren't we all? Indeed. We are, all of us. The late 1800s books on Barron Trump and the last president creating quite a spook, and that was from 2017. We talked about this at length, and I ordered every one of his works and have read through them. I read that several times. It's not a big story. I want to say it's 60 pages. It's pretty small. But it's a good read, and it does feel like he was channeling. I do think he was channeling. And you know how big Barron is? Barron is big, because, Donald is 6'3" or 6'4", and Barron's way taller than him. You got some of that giant blood going, guys. You got some of that giant blood. Why are they so sensitive about the giant blood? Billionaires emit 1,000,000 times more greenhouse gases than the average person. Yeah, and that's without Mexican food.
Right. And this is exactly why we appreciate everybody supporting us, because when we kind of point out things like this, well, we get a little demonized kind of often.
Yeah, but we are those insane people that, if we know what we know, we have to share. It's our mission. So, we don't care. And, I've twice left situations that were very, very comfortable and given everything up, and I'll do it again because I know the bigger picture. I'm here not to acquire wealth, riches, and all that. No, I'm here to help you guys in these times, and this is why Cindy's here. We're paired together, blissfully, because we do work well together, and we love each other, and we've loved each other in other lifetimes. And so when we got together, it was coming home, and it felt wonderful, and that was the blessing that they gave us. But the blessing comes with a mission, and so this is our mission to the end of this particular incarnation. And yeah, I mean, this is what people are working up to recognizing. And investments of 125 billionaires produce 393 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year. That's equivalent to the CO2 output of the whole of France. Hello. Why does anybody listen to these guys? Why does anybody listen to these guys? Because there's always humans that are willing to sell out other humans to just better themselves. And that's the sad truth. We know we can't take anything they're saying seriously, and this is part of the awakening. U.S. warming over the last 50 years exaggerated by up to 50%. Yeah, there are natural cycles. The sun is way more powerful than humanity driving around in its cars and even its jets. However, there are Dyson spheres, and there is technology that can move planets. Move planets. Yes. 5,000-year-old ring made in Iraq with silver from Turkey found in Oman. Again, we're given this whole thought that, you think back, pre 5,000-6,000 years, everybody's running around with spears, butt naked. Well, maybe you got a little bit of, a skunk covering up certain spots or what have you. Yeah, no. It's not the case. The technologies that were in play have always been much more advanced than what we're told. And in societies that are way more advanced than today's, they were more in harmony with the earth. When you get into a silver age, and especially a golden age, we choose to be in harmony with the earth. We would choose not to have toxins emitted into the air, into the water, into the soil. We wouldn't do that. So we wouldn't take any of the steps that these corporations are doing to better themselves. We wouldn't do that because we understand we're all part of one big symbiotic system.
It's that inner knowing. It's that feeling that you get inside of you, that magnetic feeling that points you in a certain direction. It's that feeling that you get when you're out in nature and suddenly you have balance and you found peace, where before your heart was just broken or you were in a very chaotic space in your mind. When we go out to nature and we feel that, just imagine that times 10. And boy, wouldn't you put yourself in that situation where you could just be around nature all the time and just release whatever you need to release, what definitely no longer serves you. If you could find that peace of mind in your soul where you are just really, you get it, you know where you're supposed to be. This feels right. You're in balance. You can be your full self. You can use all of your processes to make things really beautiful for yourself and for other people, for your children. I mean, if we could just recapture that, then head in that direction. It's that magnetic feeling that we are looking for.
So this article here, how the Earth's population exploded, because we just hit 8 billion. That's what they are saying. Since the emergence of the first humans in Africa over 2 million years ago, they're saying, the world's population has ballooned, with only fleeting pauses to the increasing number of people sharing planet Earth. The oldest fossils from earliest known humans date back 2.8 million years, found in East Africa. Now again, we have spheres, metallic spheres, that date back 2 billion years. 2 billion years. Either something's wrong with the dating of things, or the history is just totally screwed up. And there's all sorts of forbidden archaeology. And if you haven't read that book, please do get it. You could get a PDF of it, Forbidden Archaeology. It's a good eye-opener. So the estimates of the number of people that populated the Earth remained highly unreliable until the 19th century. What we do know is that our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. Mongo, go hunt now. Yes, I be back. Yes. And no, again, total distortion. They had few children compared to later settled populations in order to maintain their nomadic lifestyle. Planet's population was sparse also because partly the hunter-gatherers needed a lot of land to feed themselves, about 10 square kilometers per person. The globe's population did increase over time, but very slowly. Introduction of agriculture in the Neolithic era around 10,000 BC brought the first known population leap. With agriculture came sedentarization and the ability to store food, which caused birth rates to soar. And so around 6 million people is what they say in 10,000 BC. Now, 10,000 BC, 12,000 years ago, that's the Younger Dryas period. So after the cataclysm of the Younger Dryas period, then the population was severely depleted. And, that, again, could be the timeline, perhaps, where there was monumental shifts, but there's been big shifts after that as well. So the global population leapt to 100 million in 2000 BC, they say, and that's 250 million in the first century AD. So they say that around the time of Yeshua Jesus, there was about 250 million people on the planet. Again, 8 billion right now. Black Plague, the Black Death, brought the population to a sudden halt in the Middle Ages. The pandemic, which emerged in Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan, reached Europe in 1346 on ships carrying goods from the Black Sea. In just 8 years, it wiped out 60% of the population of Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. 60%. Now, it's fascinating to see that this is not the first and only time of plague. We saw with Justinian, the Emperor Justinian, in the 500 to 600 AD time period, there was, again, a very, very similar type of events happening with plague breaking out and all sorts of weird signs in the skies, seeing sundogs, seeing 3 or 4 suns up in the sky, seeing distorted clouds, sightings of things that we would call UFOs or UAPs today, en masse, and then all of a sudden outbreaks of plague. I wonder why. Yeah, and we know why. So as a result of the Black Death, the human population dropped between 1300 and 1400 from 429 to 374 million. Other events like the plague of Justinian, okay, that's what we're talking about, which hit the Mediterranean over 2 centuries from 541 to 767. And then the wars of the Middle Ages in Western Europe also caused temporary dips in the numbers of humans on Earth. War is a tool of population control, as well as a tool to feed these demonic beings that do exist. So from 19th century on, population began to explode due to the development of modern medicine, industrialization of agriculture. Again, this is again from the controller's point of view. Since 1800, the world's population has jumped 8-fold, from an estimated 1 billion in 1800 to 8 billion. And then, of course, they're crediting, this. Yeah, okay. So now we are faced with sperm depletion. Sperm counts have dropped. Now, the data I saw was, I think the most recent data was around 2015. So I venture to say that sperm counts are much, much, less now than they were then. Perhaps only a fraction, and that was down 60+% from, say, the 1950s. Fertility rates declining, life expectancy declining. We're on the cusp of, we're in the middle, really. We're not really in the middle. I don't know. What do you think? Maybe we're 20% into this thing, something like that. We have a ways to go. But when we see all around the globe, there's so many different depictions that give us clues as to what's happened in the past. And, we've talked about the Vimanas, the flying ships, and these were ships that were seen by people. And the Brahmastra, which is a weapon that can only be equated with modern nuclear weapons of a very large kind, not Nagasaki, Hiroshima, bigger. Think bigger. Yet, in this time period, humans were going around with bow and arrows and javelins and swords, etc., spears. But yet they saw the weapons of the beings they called the gods, and they were fearsome. And this is J. Robert Oppenheimer here on the left. For those of you that aren't aware of Oppenheimer, what's the channel with Diamond? Oppenheimer Ranch, yes. Oppenheimer Ranch, Diamond, and I don't remember his partner's name. But anyway, they bought his property. They bought Oppenheimer's property. Oppenheimer is the father of modern nuclear weaponry. Modern. And that's the thing that he said, too, when he was asked, when they watched the first explosion. And somebody asked him that question. And he said, he corrected them and saying, no, this wasn't the first time a nuclear bomb was exploded. It was the first time in modern times. Modern. Big distinction. And so he was part of the Manhattan Project, Los Alamos up in New Mexico. Yeah, the father of the atomic bomb. And he quoted again out of the Vedic books. He quoted from the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, now I am become death, destroyer of worlds. After he saw the fireball glowing after the bomb had been dropped. It's infamous. It's chapter 11, verse 32 of the Bhagavad Gita. And, if you want to really, again, we were showing originally the picture of, getting just a tiny picture of a much bigger picture. You need to look into these other scriptures and really take them in. Look all over the world, but boy, do you find so much revealed in the Hindu scriptures. So much is revealed there because they talk of these battles. Again, when we look to the cycle of the yugas, when we are in a Kali Yuga, we are made to think that we are it. There's nothing else. There's no more fairies. There's no more elves. There's no more of these magical races. There's no extraterrestrials. Everything is either angels, demons, God, or us, and that is it. Now, when we get out of the Kali Yuga, we start to be able to perceive and see beings all around us, and including nature spirits, which are part of the Devic realm, but also our perceptive abilities increase, and we could see into other densities. And then when we're in the Golden Age, it's just there is. Again, there's not really a veil, but it's just the fact that everything is just right out there and in the open.
Everything is just right there. Our understanding, our belief system, we're able to finally expand in a very, very natural way when we're in the Golden Age. We are able to take upon us so much information. It's not like you need it in books anymore because humans can carry this information inside of them and pull it at will. And we're that way right now, but it takes a lot more effort because of that dark age. You really have to go deep to find this DNA information, where in the Golden Age, it's just right there. Boom, we got it right there because of the way we are created and how much light is flowing through our body at that time.
So was the bomb exploded at Alamogordo during the Manhattan Project the first one to be detonated? And Oppenheimer said, well, yes, in modern times, of course. So he was quoting from the Mahabharata is what people expected. He also quoted at Roosevelt's funeral another quote, "Man is a creature whose substance is faith. What his faith is, he is." And again, what do we really believe? It's really, it forms us. If we do believe that we were born into original sin and we should just suffer an existence of nonstop torture unless somebody comes and save us, boy, that is such a horrible, self-defeating way to think. It's atrocious, but this is what's pounded into billions of minds on this planet. Billions. Who would do that? Well, slave masters would. Keep the slaves in mind and in line. Absolutely. That is, again, it's a control system. And that's really what it is. The whole concept of, sinning against God, being a disobedient slave. He said also, access to the Vedas is the greatest privilege this century may claim over all other previous centuries. There's way more hidden in these books than you're going to find in the Bible or the Quran, because again, they contain a different viewpoint and some stuff that the controllers have wanted to remain hidden from the masses. The Mahabharata War, the first nuclear world war that killed over 1 billion warriors. 1.6 to 1.8 billion is the number given to the amount of people that were lost in this war. Now, this is from, depending on who you listen to, most scholars will say that this took place somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago. 5,000 and 7,000 years ago? They were just telling us at the time of Christ, Yeshua, 250 million people, not 1/4 billion people were on the globe in the 1st century AD. Well, wait a minute. This war is from 3,000 to 5,000 years earlier, and 1 billion people got killed in the war. And, this was the biggest cremation event in history. And it's horrible and sad. Now, I do think that when we see this, now, was this a localized war happening just in the area that today we would look to as Pakistan, and even some of, I'd have to think if this would be, I have to bring up a map to see what part of the former Soviet Union, which one of the other stands it would be spanning into. But Pakistan, India, north into perhaps part of China, and then part of the other stands. Or was it global? Was it global in nature? When we think about how it's described and all, again, you see what can only be described as motherships, gigantic flying cities. Think about that. Flying cities housing the quote-unquote gods. And again, we're talking about humans in that era fighting with things like maces, arrows, bows, spears, swords, etc., trying to describe weaponry that might boggle our mind now. How would you describe a laser? Would you describe it as a lightning bolt?
And think of in the Bible how many times they have things explained where if you look now, a pillar of smoke or a pillar of fire that could be created by technology. And you look at some of the things that came down from the heavens, and they speak about propellers and wheels and the heads of eagles. And boy, it sure sounds like a Vimana to me.
Well, there's all different types of Vimanas, and in fact, there's many different classifications which are described, and in fact, they even vary according to the age and which one of the quote-unquote heavenly beings were using them. As you are in the more towards the Kali Yuga, when you're in the Bronze Age, they're mechanical. They're very much not too far off of what we would imagine when we think of Star Wars and Star Trek and sci-fi movies with the battles. But when you go up into the silver and when you go up into the Golden Age, they become made of pure light and pure energy. They become ships that are made of life force and plasma.
They're made out of everything that is surrounding the earth. Therefore, nothing is being harmed, nothing is being overutilized, because when that part of the mission is done, everything simply goes back to back into this boat of creation.
And when she says that, she's talking about like the ships of beings like the Galactic Federation, ships of beings like the Devas, and these beings of fifth density and higher. So, again, they're not using the mechanical per se. They're using everything that's out there, the energy from the sun. And you don't need nuclear fission or fusion to harness and to utilize the energy from stars. Again, it's our dark control system that does everything in a very, very destructive manner. So these wars were very, very real, and these wars were described in language that people could understand, and then also they've been revised and rewritten and dumbed down time and time again. Like, how often do you see elephants flying in the sky? Well, certainly you don't see elephants flying in the sky. But what they were trying to depict were battles in the sky over people's heads that were very, very real, with weaponry that had very, very real consequences. So again, 1.6 to 1.8 billion people dying in these battles in this particular war. Again, it doesn't jive with what we're given by modern science as to the amount of people in the world. And we've found damage in many areas around the globe that's very similar to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and what we would call nuclear glass. And these are 5,000 to 7,000 year old relics of something very, very destructive and very, very horrible. Now we're coming into the period again and the frequency again where things like the wars of the gods will be something that would be visible to us again. So, again, we have to, it's going to shock people, and it's going to totally blow people's paradigms, especially if they believe the world is 6,000 years old and there's no life anywhere else but Earth, and Earth is flat. No, your paradigm is going to be totally shattered, because we've never been alone. These wars are still ongoing. They're all around us. And, again, this was a massive funeral pyre, so to speak, that might have happened 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. And when we were traveling past Winslow, I was feeling it. And there is a gigantic, what they say is an asteroid crater south of Winslow, Arizona. But what Cindy got was, it wasn't an asteroid. They have the ability to take asteroids, and that's just part of warfare. They could nudge them into a trajectory and send them like missiles onto the planet and onto cities below.
That's amazing stuff.
So, I'll have all the links. There's so many people that have gone and referenced this and been amazed by, what these stories tell. So, again, our revisionist history, we're just living another chapter of it. It's a much, much bigger battle than most people realize. And again, Earth is just one small little outpost that this battle is happening on.
Indeed.
So may you be blessed by the true creator of this universe. Please do check out the mantra section on EEARTS. If you want to raise your vibrations, you can't beat it. Mantras, again, Sanskrit is a language that is constructed in such a way that it will open chakras, raise your frequency. It's one of the safest things to do, I would say. I don't think there's anything that's safer to do than doing these Sanskrit mantras. They also will protect you. So when you are saying these mantras, they start to create a force field around you that the darkness cannot inhabit.
So as you're saying the mantras, it is repatterning you and putting you into the etheric realm, into the pattern of the all. So it's very, very healthy. It's something that will enlighten you. You'll actually start to feel things like you want to eat better. You'll want to take care of yourself better. You'll want to do things that are just better and do things to fulfill and help others. It just really changes your outlook, raises your vibration. When our vibration is up, we tend to want to do better things for ourselves and our families.
Yes. As always, guys, much love. Namaste.
Namaste.